Well, there's a little Survivor music because we're going to talk a little Survivor today. I'm flicking the Bozman, and that was some version. I'm not exactly sure what version I was playing, but how's it going there, Dave?
Sounded like elevator music, Phil. That sounded like something
well,
you
the,
find in your elevators.
well, you can survive elevators, I guess.
I guess it's nice elevators. My man,
Well,
I'm doing well. Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine.
All right.
And I know I'm about to get ripped right at the start of the show because we have now narrowed things down after last week's play in games. We've now narrowed it down to the top 32 game sevens in NBA, NHL, and MLB history. Well, at least history since 1960. And the very first matchup today is a little crazy, and you got to get on the seating committee here. And because I'm the seating committee, I'm ready to take it. But the first matchup is the 1960 World Series, the Pirates and the Yankees, up against the famous 1970 NBA Finals, Knicks and Lakers. So fire away, and I'll get the shields and pillows and such ready. Go ahead.
I I don't know how you possibly put these two series in the first round of a tournament like this. This is Mazurowski walk off on one of the few walk off Game Seven home runs. There's been a couple in Game Six that have been series ending home runs. Joe Carter jumps to mind for the Blue Jays, but very few Game Seven walk off home runs in the history of the World Series, and even in the history of Major League Baseball in the postseason. Um, that's on one side, and on the other side is the Willis Reed game.
Yes,
The,
it is.
the Knicks, the last time the Knicks were relevant. No, that's not exactly true, but still, it's the last time they. I always go back to when Harry met Sally when he says, "Yeah, this is what 1988 or something like that. We're about to give the Knicks their first championship since 1973." And then he shoots it at the wastebasket and it rims out. And they still haven't won, even since that movie came out and since this team, which is not 1973 but 1970. Uh, what were they? How do these two series? Willis Reed, the Knicks.
Was that a good game seven?
What's that?
Was it a good game seven? Was it a quality game?
With the Knicks?
Yeah.
It was a great series. It is funny. It's funny you say that because what I didn't realize until probably a couple of years, you hear Willis Reed growing up. You grew up in the New York City area. You're going to hear about the Knicks and Willis Reed. He played 25, 27 minutes in that game and scored 4 points. And it's the
Yeah.
Willis Reed game. 4 points.
4 points.
It was the Clyde Frazier game. He dominated that game. But anyway, so I mean, was it an epic game with a game-winning shot at the end? No, it wasn't. Was it back? I don't know the ins and outs of it. I was less than a year old at the time. Uh, but I will say it's the Willis Reed. Like if I say Willis Reed, people go, "Oh yeah, 1970 Knicks. Yes, 1970 Knicks. That was epic." And,
So
and
I,
come,
I came up with the only thing I had to defend this being seated where it was. When you hear some of the other NBA games we're going to talk about, not necessarily tonight, but later on in the brackets, how this game was seated lower than them uh, is confusing to say the least. Bad job by me.
all right, all right. Well, I mean, so that's on the one side. You definitely have the Knicks and the Lakers, uh, and Reed was instrumental. I think inspirational, I guess, would be the word there. Knicks playing at home in Game Seven there, and I think it went 2-2, 1-1-1 in that year, if I was looking correctly at that. Um, and so they needed the Lakers won Game Six to send it back to New York, and then Reed I think got injured in that Game Six, right? And so the question was whether or not he'd play at all. Everyone assumed he was done for the year, and he comes out and played sparingly and played okay. I think he scored the first two baskets for the Knicks in the game, if I remember correctly.
And that was it. There was his 4 points.
That was it for the game, yeah. And from there, it was Frazier and the other guys that took over. But great team. Obviously, Bradley and DeBusschere and and Chamberlain on the other side, and West, and epic series. Um, so on the other side of the bracket, you've got Pirates and Yankees, and this was Casey Stengel. You look at the Yankees lineup, and it's Mantle, and it's Berra, and it's Maris, and Whitey Ford, and Casey Stengel. And Stengel got fired after this, right? And I think he said at that point it was he'd never make the mistake of being 70 again. Um, but the reason in my mind he got fired is he only pitched Whitey Ford twice,
Yeah.
arguably the best pitcher in postseason history, and he only pitches him twice. Was it Game 3 and Game 6? Ford pitched brilliantly. How do you? I mean, I don't mind. I know he won all those World Series, but they should have won this one too. The Yankees outscored. This was the only series, right? That the MVP was Bobby Richardson in the series, right? For the Yankees. No excuse for the Yankees losing the series. Back and forth, the game was amazing. Back and forth, the Yankees should have won. Um, the Pirates, the Red Sox. Pirates got one in the bottom of the first. They got another one in the second, and then the Yankees came back. The Pirates got up to 4-0. Then the Yankees came back, took a 5-4 lead, then 7-4 lead. Pirates had a big eighth inning. Dick Rote with a key hit, Clemente, and then Hal Smith with a 3-run homer to take the lead going into the ninth. Then you got Mantle and Berra getting the key RBIs to take the lead, 9-8. I'm sorry, to tie the game at 9 rather. 9-7, then 9-8 off of after the Mantle hit, 9-8, 9-9 after the Berra hit, and then Mazeroski leading off the bottom of the ninth, and just an epic World Series, epic game. In my mind, the walk-off home run and the quality of the game and the quality of the players on both sides for both series was epic. So it's the walk-off home run that makes that a win for the Pirates.
Well, I will tell you this, and you knew the seeding, and so did some of our experts and our emailers. Of the 4 matchups we're going to talk about tonight, 2 have already been decided and 2 haven't. And this was one of the ones that your vote was going to determine the winner, because we were sitting at the Knicks Lakers were actually sitting there with a slight lead of 41 points to 37 for the Pirates Yanks, and your 22 points is going to be enough to send the Pirates and Yankees on to the next round.
Now you could accuse me of loving when the Yankees lose, and
I,
may come up again later this evening.
I'll probably save that. For other Yankee series, they're involved in a few game sevens and a few game sevens in this bracket. So I'll save your Yankee hate criticisms for later on.
All right.
Now, game 2 here in the bracket is a 4 versus 5 seed matchup on this in this particular quadrant of the bracket, and it's an NHL game against a Major League Baseball World Series, one that we talked about in the play-in games. If you haven't listened to that, you can go back, listen to episode 4 for the 8 play-in games, and one of those play-in winners was the 65 World Series, the Dodgers against the Tigers. And we have an NHL playoff series a little early on in the playoffs. We'll see if that hurts this game in your opinion. But 1987 Islanders and Capitals game 7, and it went 4 overtimes. Take it away.
Yeah, it's an interesting series, and the Islanders were still many of the same players from their epic team that won four straight just a few years before that, and finishing up I think in '83. So many of the same, or '84 was it? Many of the same players, many of the same faces there, and legends, right? Trottier and Bossy and LaFontaine and Suter and Dennis Potvin, and on and on. So great team, great players, a lot of Hall of Famers there. I really don't remember the Capitals team that well. Scott Stevens, I see, was on the team, who ended up becoming an all-time great Devil as well. Not many of the other names on that, ring a bell with me as not a huge hockey fan growing up. Certainly followed the Devils and a lot of the local teams, but not so much on the Capitals. And obviously the Stanley Cup winners like Edmonton and so forth, with Gretzky and Messier and so forth. So from that perspective, definitely some great firepower there, particularly on the Islanders side. Game 7, 4 overtimes. What do you say about this one? It was back and forth.
The goalies facing about 70 shots each.
Unbelievable, yeah. And then after the so the Capitals started it off. The Islanders tied it. The Capitals could take the lead. The Islanders tied it, and then 3 overtimes and change later, LaFontaine gets the winner. Epic game there.
Not even a great goal, but I'm sure at that time, just
Yeah,
get us
right.
out of here.
What time in the morning was that? That must have been crazy. Not quite the 27 inning game or whatever it was for the Mets and the Braves that day, but unbelievable. And then on the other side, you've got the World Series. We talked about this the other day. This was the Koufax series when he pitched on short rest because of Yom Kippur. Not the excuse that Casey Stengel had for Whitey Ford. So Koufax starting game 2, 5, and 7, and pitching complete game shutouts in games 5 and 7, and the last one obviously on short rest. So amazing series there, amazing performance by Koufax. Obviously, from a drama standpoint, a 2-0 win when the runs are scored in the 4th inning. Not quite as exciting as a 4 overtime thriller, but to me, I do think it's more relevant that you're talking about the World Series and the game-ending World Series versus the first round of the playoffs in a series or a season when neither team went on to become a great team. The Islanders, I think, lost the next round, and the Caps were, they were a good team in those times, but not at the level of the Islanders or the Oilers or some of the legendary teams at that time. So, in my mind, this is the Dodgers World Series going on.
Well, unfortunately for you, you have voted for the side that was behind by enough that they could not recover. The 4 overtime game already had 71 of a possible 100 points, and you pushing 22 over to the Dodgers gets them to 29, but not enough. The Islanders Capitals will move on in this bracket of the best 7th game.
All right, I get no problem with that. I mean, you go by the quality of the game itself. It's hard to argue with.
I think that's what you're arguing here: the quality, the suspense, the drama of a game that goes into 4 OTs, and I think I mentioned it was on Easter into next day, and just crazy situation is enough to get it the win here. Most of the experts agreed with that, our panel of experts, and we'll thank them again later, I'm sure, for taking time to fill out their votes. And we move on to another matchup here that features hockey against baseball, and we'll see which way you go here. And it's the 2001 World Series, the D-backs against the Yankees, against the 1994 Stanley Cup Finals, the Rangers against the Canucks. Take it away, Bozman.
All right. Start with the hockey. And this was one of my favorite things about the Rangers in this time was how long it had been, right? And everybody knows 1940, and they finally get off the schneid in this one, and it took really. I think the the best series here was really um, the game, the semifinal game against matchup against the Devils,
That was painful.
and the House of Pain, um, with Game 6 and Game 7 both made that bracket for you. I
Yes.
get why the finals are here, because this was an epic series in and of itself. Uh, the Canucks win the first, the Rangers win the second, Rangers win the third, uh, and fourth, and then so they're up 3 games to 1. Canucks come back, they win in New York, they bring it back to Vancouver for Game 6. They win that one as well, send it back to New York for the final game, and it's 3-2. Now in this one, the Rangers ended up being comfortably ahead. They scored the first 2 goals. Vancouver tied it. Sorry, Vancouver scored to make it 2-1.
Two
Then the
one.
Rangers scored to make it 3-1, uh, and and uh, and then the Canucks got a goal later in the third to pull within one, but they never quite got even with the Rangers. So from that standpoint, not an epic game in and of itself. It was a close game. There was some chances, as I recall, at the very end, but nothing where you go, oh my goodness, the, look at that. On the other side, the Diamondbacks and the Yankees, what a series. The individual games there, and you think about Clemens on the one side and Pettit, and um, uh, on the other side, you got Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling, Mariano in the bullpen, and you thought that was maybe going to be. I think the Diamondbacks closer was Byung-Hyun Kim, who was, he was a decent closer, had a good year that year, but come on, Mariano, um, and on the Yankee side, you had Jeter, you had O'Neill, you had Knobloch, you had Bernie Williams, Tino Martinez, Alfonso Soriano, Scott Brocious, great team, and that was their dynasty from '96 through, I guess you could argue, even through 2009. That was their dynasty. 2003 was kind of a little bit of a gap for the Yankees after '03, but still, great team for many years there. The Diamondbacks had this run where they were that culminated in this World Series win, where they were a competitive team for a number of years there, and they put this team together: Luis Gonzalez, Matt Williams, Steve Finley, Mark Grace at first base, and then the dominant pitching of Schilling and Johnson. And Johnson won 3 games in the series, including coming in relief to win this one. The thing that stands out to me about this game, and we talked about it the other day offline, uh, was actually the call in the ninth inning that Tim McCarver made. And I know Tim McCarver took some flack for kind of being a little full of himself in later years as an announcer, but he had a knack every now and again for coming up with a great prediction. And when the Diamondbacks tied up that game, loaded up the bases off of Mariano in that series in game 7 here, and they pulled in the infield. Uh, I remember, and you and I both thought this, McCarver said, I questioned them pulling in the infield because with his cutter fastball, uh, a lot of times he gets a little jam shot and it goes right over the shortstop's head. And then that's exactly what happened.
Bingo.
And there's the winning run. And interestingly, a little footnote to me, anyway, Craig Counsell, who was hit by pitch to load up the bases after Womack had tied the game with the double, also was instrumental in the '97 Marlins World Series win. Or maybe instrumental might be a strong word, but he was there and he was a key contributor, say, and he was a contributor here too. He
Yeah.
was scrappy little players, and surprised me, by the way, not at all, that he became a very good manager recently for the Brewers. So uh, to me, this was epic. This was a walk off hit in Game 7 against a great series. And the one thing I forgot to mention on the Rangers real quick. Um, the I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, Phil, but the utility index. Does that name ring a bell to you?
A little bit, yeah.
So back in the early '90s, I remember reading about a sports fan, a New York sports fan who had gone to school in Boston, and he said he got tired of all the Red Sox fans crying in their beer over 1917 and the last time the Red Sox had won the World Series. And he said, "Listen, the Rangers hadn't won since 1940 in a much smaller league." So he came up with this idea where if you take the number of teams in your league, the inverse of that, that's your percent chance of winning in any given year.
I like anything with an inverse. Yes.
Right? So that's your chance. And if you multiply that out by the number of years, get the and then take the inverse of that, then that's the your chance of how many of winning a championship in those numbers of years. So the futility index for the
Yeah.
Red Sox
That's what.
was something like 110, being in a 20-ish, plus or minus depending on expansion over the years, 20-ish team league,
League.
Major League
Yeah.
Baseball over the years and expanded over versus the Rangers who for what 20 of those or 20 or 30 of those years were in an 8-team league,
That's
and
uh,
you
that's futility.
and so compared the Red Sox futility index was like 110. The Rangers futility index was 514.
That seems like one of those things where you have the result you want and you work the math until you get it.
It could be that. It could be that. But it's just a basic thing where, listen, they should have won in an 8-team league. They should have won every 8 years and
Sure.
won 0 times in those what 50 years, 40. I can do math, right? 54 years, right? Um,
Yeah.
so 0 for 54, that adds up to a utility index of 540 versus or 14 rather versus 110. And the Cubs were like 120 when they from 1908. So you get the idea. Anyway, that's the
You-
Rangers. I'm moving on with the Diamondbacks over the Yankees again. Maybe a little New York bias or anti-Yankee bias there, but
It's
that was a
ju-
great.
judging from our experts and from our emailers, it is not biased at all. As with your 22 points, the D-back Yankees series has now reached 82 points, so they move on very comfortably in this bracket of best seventh games. And you out there listening, if you want to be part of the brackets and get your emails in with your selections, it's flickboz at gmail.com. And we'll have another 4 matchups out there on the YouTube site, so you can vote on the next round. This is the North bracket. Why I called it the North bracket, I have no idea, but the South bracket will be up there soon. It features the 79 Pirates, who we've heard from before, the 92 Braves Pirates. This is not up against each other, just some teams and games you might see, some more overtime hockey, some more Lakers basketball. So if you're interested, check out the YouTube site and those matchups and then get your votes in. We got one more to talk about tonight, and then we'll do some trivia and some talk about Survivor. But I will tell you that your vote is going to decide this one, so take it very seriously. Here
Of,
we go.
of
The
course,
two, of course, you always take it seriously. I know. The 2013 NBA Finals, the Spurs against the Heat, against the 2003 NLCS, one that we talked about in the play-in brackets, the Marlins against the Cubs.
yeah. So on the Marlins Cubs side, this is a series similar to uh, other series that we talked about, and I'm drawing a blank, where the epic game. Oh no, I was talking about the '04 Red Sox, where the key point in the series wasn't Game 7, right? This was Game 6 was the Steve Bartman deal, and so that was a great series, but not necessarily a great Game 7, right? So the Marlins also, to me, get a little bit of a knock because they really only ever have had two competitive teams in their entire existence. It might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's not a lot of an exaggeration. So I have not to spoil the ending, but I have a hard time putting that game, that series over anything, even with the epic game six and the curse of the Cubs, the curse of the Billy Goat, whatever you want to call it. Um, on the other side, I will say, and this was a little bit of what I got on you in the matchup between the Knicks and the Pirates at the beginning of the broadcast, is I think either one of those matchups beats either one of these matchups. Um, there's some of the other ones in here. Those are some good ones, right? So Diamondbacks and the Caps and the Islanders and Koufax, like those are some great, very deserving. The Spurs Heat was great because those were two great teams, and you had Kawhi Leonard and Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, and then you had LeBron and Wade and Bosh, Battier and Ray Allen. Great teams.
You
Was
could
this?
make a good argument that Game 6 may have been better in this series as well.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and this was not an epic, down to the wire finish, right?
Yeah, I think it was like 95, 80 something. Yeah, 7 points, 8 point game.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this was more for the series and for the quality of the players and the all-time greats and so forth that you had in it. But I would advance, in my mind, the Spurs Heat over the Marlins and the Cubs and Steve Bartman at all.
Yeah, that one had a minor lead, small lead coming into your vote. It was 44-34. So your 22 points pushes them to the 66-34 victory. And as it turned out, all four series that had the better seed, and we've had our questions with the seeding committee, yes, but the out of the North, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 have advanced to the next round,
Uh-huh.
which we will talk about down the line at some point. But those four games have moved on. Just to recap, the 1960 World Series, the Pirates Yankees won their matchup. The 1987 Islanders Capitals Patrick Division Series moved on. The 2001 World Series, D backs and Yanks moved on. And the 2013 NBA Finals, the Spurs against the Heat won their matchup. So the 1, 2, 3, and 4 all defeat those lower seeded games. So we're a little chalky.
All right. Well, that's the way the cookie bounces sometimes. Every now and again, the committee gets it right in terms of the seeding. Now, again, I would tell you, I think some of the ones that lost may have been better than one or two of the ones that won, but that's the way it works out.
I'll get right on that with the seeding committee. I
All
must have flipped the coin like they do on Survivor, but we'll get to that later on.
right. Yes, indeed.
I got some trivia for you.
Trivia time. Trivia time. All right, hit it.
And it is not just for you. It is for anyone out there who thinks they can go 6 for 6. You can write in your answers to these questions and email them to us. I'll put them out on the YouTube site as well. But I've been watching some classic baseball games, as you'll see from some of these trivia questions. So whether that influences any of your answers or not, I'm not sure. But it was the first time in watching Met classics that I saw the Mets lose a game. And that game was game 1 of the 69 World Series. They were showing the entire 69 World Series, and the Mets dropped game 1 to the Orioles. And question 1 is, who was the winning pitcher for the Orioles that game?
Who was the winning pitcher? It must have been Jim Palmer.
Jim Palmer is a very solid selection. That's all I can tell. I can't tell you if you're right or wrong, but that's a
Yes, he was.
very solid selection. Well, I could tell you, but I'm not going to tell you. Question number 2, leading into our chat about Survivor. You've watched a number of the seasons. I don't know if you're at 40, but you're close. Have there been more male or female winners on Survivor?
Yes.
Yes,
One,
male.
yes, that is correct. I will say more female winners.
more female winners. This is the Bozman's guess. You can go with his choice or you can go out on your own. There's only two choices here. It's not tied after 39 years. I will tell you that. 39 seasons,
Well,
excuse
you
me.
got one person won twice, so you only have 38 winners.
Well, yeah, I'm not getting that technical.
All right.
I'll tell you this: it's not that close where you have to be that technical. So
Oh
it's
boy,
okay.
I hope I didn't. I hope I did. I wasn't. I didn't put a lot of thought into that, obviously, but nevertheless.
It's close enough. It's close enough to talk about. All right, I'm big on this date questions. These dates in history. So this date, May 12th in history, in 1926. What pitcher got his 400th win on this date in 1926?
Yeah, it has to be the big train, Walter Johnson.
Walter Johnson is what you're going with. That nickname, you could check if that's accurate, but you're going with Walter Johnson as your official guess. Okay, writing.
Pretty good
Get
about
get it. You feel good about that. It's good that you tell the audience listening whether you feel good or not so good.
it. Do you have
Um,
for my theory on what that Walter Johnson was the greatest strikeout pitcher of all time?
you can share that theory.
If you, I'd say you have to do a little
Does
bit of.
it involve a futility index? Does it
I,
involve any inverse ratios?
it does involve some inverse ratios. You have to compare the strikeouts per 9 innings of him versus the league average, which I have not done. I'm only theorizing. I know that the strikeouts in general were about half the rate they are now, and then sort of prorate that and compare that to the Randy Johnsons and Nolan Ryans of later years, and I think that he would uh, compare very well with those guys. We were talking the other day about the current active leader is Justin Verlander, who in 15 seasons I think is still 500 strikeouts behind Walter Johnson, which to me is amazing considering how many more strikeouts there are in the game today.
Well, I'm going to stick with the theme of what happened on this date, but we're moving it all the way forward to 1970.
All right.
And I would like to know what player hit his 500th home run on this date in 1970 while playing first base for the Cubs.
That had to be Ernie Banks. Let's say, hey, Mr. Baseball, Mr. Cub,
Mr. Cub.
let's play two. I knew I'd get to his nickname eventually, Mr. Cub.
Now, some of our listeners was he always a first baseman? And going back in your annals of baseball history,
He is
was he
known as
always at first?
he's definitely known as a shortstop. I believe he did move over to first base later in his career. So that seems likely at that point.
Not someone just dropping in for a year with the Cubs for a cup of coffee, no?
I think not. I think it
All
was.
right. We're locking that in. We're locking in Ernie Banks. Hit his 500th home run on this date in 1970. All right. I watched about 10 minutes of a Yankees classic today, which I'm sure it's called something else, but I could only take about 10 minutes of a Yankees victory. But this was a bit of a heartwarming one as Jim Abbott pitched a no hitter, and this was on September 4th, 1993. So, not a question about this date. But I tuned in about the bottom of the eighth with the Yankees batting, and number two for the Yankees was batting, and it was just a bit strange to see that number two was not Derek Jeter. So I looked things up, and this was indeed the player who had that number before Jeter had it. Was the next Yankee to use number two. So I want to know in the Jim Abbott game who was wearing number two for the Yankees.
Who was wearing number two for the Yankees? So let me think about that. 93. It's not going to be somebody. I honestly don't remember that team that well. It wasn't a Winfield or somebody like that. I don't remember if he was on that team.
Bernie was there getting a fly ball in center field, and Mattingly was at first. So some famous Yanks on that team. I won't claim that this one is a famous Yankee.
Was it Jay Buhner or Ken Phelps?
It was neither of them.
I bring those up. I think you know where I'm going with that. In
Yes.
honor of the great Jerry Stiller passing away. How could you trade Jay Buhner?
That would have been a good one to have in here, but I did not.
That was yeah, yeah. Um, I will say Jim Leyritz.
Jim Leyritz.
May have
That
been on the team that year, but there you go.
is, that is indeed a guess. I'm writing it down.
He was a Yankee at some point.
I wrote down JL, and I'm sure in 10 minutes I won't remember what that stands for, but I wrote it down.
You may want to go somewhere else if you're listening.
You may want to drift in another direction. If it helps at all, number two was playing second base. It probably doesn't help at all. Now, as Dave mentioned, he was quizzing me on active strikeout leaders, and the first question I had to ask, well, was it for pitchers or for batters? So that made me wonder, who is the active Major League Baseball strikeout leader for a batter?
Who struck out the most times as a batter in today's Major League Baseball? Uh,
It's
uh,
a stall tactic, ladies and gentlemen. Yes,
you may have recognized that.
I did. I
It's
spotted.
not the stalling. Uh, uh, I'm going to say it's not a great guess, but I'll say Albert Pujols.
Albert Pujols. I'm writing down AP, and I will know what that stands for in a few minutes. I'm not saying it's right, but at least I'll know what it stands for. So those questions will be available if you didn't quite catch everything, or the Bozman suggestions of what may be right. And I will tell you, he's got at least a couple right and at least a couple wrong. I'll give you that clue right now.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I knew that. Uh,
You didn't feel good about a couple of those. Yes, I know.
yes, yes.
But you felt good about a few. All right.
And
Well,
so we
we're
go from the Survivor tournament of Game Sevens to the
yes, very good. Very good transition. Well done. Well, where do you want to start with this? You mentioned you thought it was a good subject to talk about. We know we both watch it, as do some of our listeners. What do you think of the season so far?
I've enjoyed the season tremendously. I know a lot of. I've heard some of my friends and family talking about how it's a little cheap that the guys don't actually get voted off and they don't actually get sent home. I think you had to keep everybody around if they wanted to stay
Why?
because
Why?
they're returning winners.
They're not superstars. This isn't, uh, Tom Selleck. I don't know why that's the first name that came into my head, but these aren't people that had nothing better to do. Send them home. Send the first four or five home at least. My goodness.
I don't know, but the first 4 or 5 were likely to include some big names, and they did.
Well, they did, but that's their own fault. You don't want to go home, stick around.
No, I had no problem with that, and I actually enjoyed.
How many people are on the jury? 17? I mean, it's ridiculous.
There will be 15 people on the jury.
I know how many. Well, Sandra bailed. Yeah, it's a 15. Yes, I know how many are really there. Jeff doesn't even announce them walking in. He can't remember all the names.
Or will there be? I guess there'd be 16, right? They get down to the final three. Uh, assuming that holds for them. Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, there's a lot of people on the show. There's a lot of things there. I don't have any problem with that. I've enjoyed Edge of Extinction. Uh, I will say the one thing on the old school versus new school thing here is people like Sandra and Yule uh, were authors of their own demise. So I think they could have bucked that trend at least a little bit further
Yes.
than they did. Yule, foolishly saying openly that he wanted to collect fire tokens, and we were like, "Yeah, no, you're done. We're out of here."
Yule went from playing it beautifully to playing it stupidly in a matter of about a half hour.
Yeah, I think it was that time he opened his mouth. Like that was it. That was his. If he could have just shut up for that 30 seconds, he probably would have been fine for at least another round or two. And Sandra, same thing. Like her whole mantra, as has been mentioned, was just talk about survive in advance, get to the next vote, and don't be the one that gets voted out this time. And she She was safe. She would have been safe, but then she gave Denise an opening, and Denise slayed the queen. She slayed
Yeah,
the queen. So that's maybe a transition from the edge of, well, before we leave the edge of extinction, I want to think about who would likely be the ones to come back. And obviously Natalie has the huge advantage. She,
we do. What is the huge advantage?
well, she has three advantages. A couple other people have one advantage. So
Yeah,
we don't.
but what does it mean? You get a 10-yard head start in a 100-yard race? I don't know how valuable these are.
It's hard to say. I do expect it will be close in the end. They're going to make it, not a runaway. I would think, um, and make it so you have to be good at a number of different things, not just physical, not just dexterity, but I think there was in the preview a puzzle, so forth. So I do expect you have to be good at a multitude of different tasks to get through in this. And one of the things I like to look at, I don't want to spoil the watching of the show, is just to watch who they feature, and they featured her, and they featured Rob, and they featured Tyson. So to me, if it doesn't come down to at least two of the three of those guys, of those three in the end for getting back in, I would be surprised.
This would be Tyson's third time in the main
Yeah.
main draw because he returned once and got voted out again.
Yep. I don't expect actually it to be Tyson. I think they featured him in the last episode because of how good he
Oh,
was.
and he would have to be one of the logical choices to get back in. Rob's had some minor injuries and doesn't seem 100% into it. I mean, there were times in past seasons he's been way too into it.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't see him getting back. Some of the other logical choices, you know, may not be as into it as well. I don't know. Adam is a possibility. He wasn't on Edge that long. Like you said, Natalie would have to be considered. I'm hoping Yule has another half hour swing and it goes a good way, and maybe he pulls off
Okay.
getting back. And if he gets
Arbiter.
back to act well, yeah.
Yeah. There's some good athletes there. I think it would be surprising if it's not one of those guys that we mentioned. I think the other ones haven't really played that hard from Extinction Island. It doesn't seem like so. Um, maybe Nick, as you said, or not Nick.
Adam.
Adam. Yeah, sorry. And Wendell with the other two that might have a chance. So we probably named half the people on Extinction.
Yeah, we're all
Uh, so anyway, speaking of the Queenslayer, so that gets us to the final five that are in it, and I would think that whoever comes back is going to have a different time than. And I'm trying to blank on who won when they came back from Edge of Extinction last time. Um, but that was an epic win, and they properly took on the the favorite there in the fire making challenge to have something on their belt that they could say, "Hey, I won. I did this. I didn't just come back in and coast through. Um, I won the challenges, and then I won the fire making challenge, and that did it. They won the game for that. So I don't expect that to happen again this time. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? I think it was Devins was the favorite,
He
and
may have been, yeah, he may have been the one talking himself up like that. But you have to use something to talk yourself up for sure.
yeah. So I look at the final five. I think I'm sure everyone is thinking Tony's the odds-on favorite, but that means you're the one that everyone is probably gunning for. Even his, cops are us ally Sarah is probably going to turn on him. I would think.
Yeah, I will say in our household there was a change of attitude. I think on Michelle. I think both my daughters, Allison and Caitlin, were kind of not on her side, and now suddenly they are. So maybe Michelle can pull something off here in the with the final five.
What's on her resume? I don't see it. I see. To me, the best thing she can say is she almost convinced Nick to flip. Almost, and he should. She
Almost.
was right. He should have, and then he got
Yeah,
voted out. But
her resume is a little lacking. You're right. You're right.
And then she won when she had to. That was a good move. That was an epic win when Ben had the disadvantage, and she and Nick worked together to get him the disadvantage. So there's not nothing on it, and she has survived. She has played a decent game. I don't want to take away from the fact that she's gotten to the end in this season of winners, which are all great players. That's no small accomplishment. So, but of the five, I think she's got the least chance.
I would. I'm looking at Denise, Ben, Sarah, Tony. You're probably right. I can't look at that list and say, anyone's got a 40-50% chance. But if you're telling me Michelle is below 15%, yeah, you might be right.
I think that's probably fair. I think uh, Denise also has basically one notch on her belt in my mind. She's played a good game. She's played a good social game. Everybody seems to like her. I'm not sure why. I don't really. Um, but but she beat the
You're,
queen,
you're
uh,
not a fan. I get it.
and that was an epic moment. I mean, to use her own idol against her, that was pretty sweet. Um,
What have you thought about this whole economy and the fire tokens, and you can buy you some peanut butter? Or did you think it really had a payoff? I would say not yet, but what do you think?
say one of my favorite moments in the game in the entire season was when Tony got the disadvantage played against him, and he's reading down the whole thing like, "Oh my god, I get to get this! Oh, it's against me! Oh, the
Boo.
extortion advantage! This is going to be epic! Oh, that was awesome! That was worth it by itself to me."
Okay, that was a good moment. I think that and all the talking at Tribal is what's frustrated me. Now, I say this as a fan and someone who's going to watch the finale and someone who's going to watch season 41 if there is one. Um, it, the Tribal talk doesn't do it for me, and the economy I didn't think was a terrible idea, but I don't see it working out for the fans that well.
All right, that's fair. I like the idea. Yeah, I did think they could have developed it a little better. It would have been interesting, maybe if there was more in it or less in it. It seemed like there was only just enough to be annoying. It was interesting to watch people like Tony scramble and Nick scramble to say, "Well, we need 8," and he only had 6, or um, so he had to then, and Tony needed 6, I think, and he only had 3, so he had to scramble with people he was playing with and people he was playing against to get the fire tokens. And that was pretty good. I thought that was very interesting. It added a little element
Who
to the
is it? Who is it hurt that's had no tokens?
who is
I,
it?
I don't know that it's hurt anybody.
If it's hurt people, but it has given people advantages, and it has made people like Tony scramble. Like if Tony didn't get those 6, he probably uh, he doesn't play and he doesn't win the immunity that episode, and he might have been voted out.
I
So
know
he
a lot of people.
was
I know a lot of people think the game has evolved into this. Wow, now it's gone to this step and that step, and it's evolved and improved. I think is what most people would say. I would probably say, well, it's changed, but I don't know that it's improved. Did I prefer Survivor 10 or Survivor 40? Maybe I'm stuck with the old school, but I probably enjoyed the first 10 more than the last 10.
I don't disagree with that, but I think to me it was getting a little stale watching the alliances just rule the day and knowing what was going to happen. Unless someone flipped, you knew what was going to happen. Now you don't know who's allied with who from one episode to the next, and even sometimes within the episode, you don't know who's allied with who. And I think that's when I first was watching season one. Uh, I think that's how most people were playing the game because only what's his name Richard was the
Richard.
one that really was playing with the idea of the alliance, and he was the one that when once people bought into it, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. But he was the only guy that he was the guy that thought of it, and so once that sort of became the way to win, it took to me a little bit of the once the alliances were set. it started to become a little, by season 20 or season 30, you start to knew what was going to happen. Now they keep mixing it up though. They keep adding these extra wrinkles. I get what you're saying. Like it'd be interesting to see to go back to like no extras, like just the basic Survivor, and see how people play at that point. That'd be interesting. I don't know.
Now, I don't mind two idols in play or maybe a slightly different idol, but you get into their six or seven idols. There's a flip your coin, there's a safety without a vote.
Yeah,
And I hope some of this stuff was, well, it's our 40th season. We're just throwing any idea we had out there that seemed reasonable. We're throwing that in. And some of those things aren't included again. Um, but I
50-50.
guess
Yeah,
we'll see
I
what
didn't
happens.
before. I agree with you on that one. I kind of like the idea of just being able to walk away from that was an epic gamble that Jeremy took. I love Jeremy. I thought he was a great player. Um, I was disappointed he got voted out, but it is what it is. Going down the list, what do you think? So Tony, I think you would agree, has the least bad chance of anybody. Maybe to put it that way. Is that a statement?
Yeah.
If he, let's say, if let me put it this way, if he's sitting at the end, does he win?
No,
No.
I don't. If he's sitting there in a vote of two or a vote of three, does he win?
Yeah.
Do you think people like him?
I don't think that matters among these 40 people. Again, among the 40, the season 40, I think they're going to vote for the who played the best.
I for some reason I keep looking at Sarah's name and I'm like, that's who I think's going to win it.
All right. Well, that was my next question was because she's played a good game. She's played a lot quieter game, even though Tony's I think played quiet for him. Uh, she's played a very quiet game, but she has played a strategic game. She got an idol, right? She got an immunity, a hidden immunity idol. And she's played the alliance as well. She has not made herself a target. Has she even really gotten any votes?
In that
Couple.
week, wasn't it like 4-3-2 one week? Was she the
Yeah,
two? I don't.
that's right. She was target one of the targets once, but that was
Yeah, but I you may have a point that Tony's going to get some votes if he's some positive votes if he's in the end. But I think there are also almost has to be a few people that Tony is upset enough to not vote for him.
yeah.
And I still think that's a factor. I still think the social aspect's gonna mean something when it comes to who do I want to give $2 million to? Do I want to give it to Tony? I don't know.
What do you think about Michelle?
Oh,
Some of your others like her?
it would. She'd have to do something drastic and good in the first hour tomorrow for me to think she's got a shot.
All right, but I mean, if she's going to get to the final three, chances are, unless someone just takes her with them, if she gets herself to the final three, then you think she's got a chance.
A chance, yeah. I would say I would rank them Sarah 1, Ben 2, Tony 3, Denise 4, Michelle 5. And the returnee probably not much chance.
Yeah, Ben, I think to me, he's made some moves or he's tried to make some moves. I think he does have the idol. He's made good alliances, but I think he's annoyed a lot of people too, maybe even more than
Yeah,
Tony.
that's what I worry about. That's why do I
I think
want to place him higher? I wouldn't place him one because of that.
I think it's Tony and Sarah in some order, first and second.
It's
I
almost who am I voting for versus who am I not voting against? And I don't I would try to vote someone for positives if I was there, I think, but who knows after 30 some days what you'd really do.
I think strategically Tony and Sarah probably don't sit next to each other in the final three. One of them will turn on the other one, and the winner of that will win.
Well, I
That's my,
think
my
the last hour tomorrow or the reunion show is all done from their homes. They couldn't be together for the reunion.
yeah, yeah.
So I have a hunch the show's going to go well into the third hour before we know who the winner is.
Yeah, it's been getting later and later.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think this will break that record and be
and
later.
I think I don't mind that so much, but I do miss. I love the reunion show. I actually like back in the first few seasons when they used to talk to everybody at least a little bit because I like some of those. Particularly in this series, in this season, I like all the players. There's not a player here that I wouldn't want to hear something from.
No, I would like to hear what they have to say too. I'll agree with you on that.
So my point would be, I don't care how long the last episode goes, but make the reunion show an hour.
Yeah, there's time on when you're seeing the honeymooners and baseball from 1969. There's time on TV to show these things.
Yeah, yeah. So I would put Tony first as the least bad chance. I think all the other players, somebody's going to make some moves here to try to get either Tony or Sarah or both of them out. It wouldn't surprise me significantly to see Michelle, Denise, and Ben in the finals. I don't know.
Well, we'll see how wrong we are with our predictions in about 24 hours. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our expert panel of voters who helped out with the bracket. It featured Paul Ingray and Tim Grasso and Kevin Hall and Eric Martin. We appreciate their help and help from our emailers as well. The turnout for voting was much higher than it was for the play-in games. So we thank you for listening, and if you can tell your friends, spread the word, something to pass the days here while we're still pretty much in the house all day. And Dave, thank you so much for doing this again,
Oh,
and a lot of fun as always.
indeed, indeed. Good stuff.
We will talk to each other after the show tomorrow, I'm sure, and we'll do another one of these later in the week or over the weekend. So we look forward to that, and we hope everyone enjoys the Survivor finale tomorrow. Take it easy, Dave.
You too, Flick.